Hi, Spencer. Welcome. Hello. Can you hear me? I don't see any audio connected to you. Can you hear me? Hey, everyone. How's it going? Well, I can see a lot of people, but nobody seems to be talking here. So maybe you don't have your audio connected yet.
Audio wasn't working, but it is now.
Yeah,
Oh, great.
it made me do all these weird things.
Yeah, same.
Damn Zoom.
And when I came on, Spencer, Adam's picture was your face.
Somebody's trying to steal my identity.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you know, if you can't beat them, you have to join them, right?
Yeah.
Well, we've got a couple of minutes as people trickle in. Anything that anybody wants to chat about other than seller financing and 1031 exchange stuff?
I still have spruce available if you're curious.
Okay, good to know.
I told
I'll
you.
buy it for $1.
If he'd let me just assume the loan, I'd buy it. I'll think about this, Nancy.
Well, we got an offer. We actually did get an offer last night, so that was helpful. But
How long's it been on the market?
shut up, okay?
300 and how many days now?
I don't know how many days I should know. Since March 4th.
Wow.
And I've been trying to get
And
up
someone's
running some
on
live
hold
in
with
January. I know, right?
I am sorry.
Spencer's a pain.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started. Welcome all to the Investor Mastermind. I'm sure we'll have some people join as we are talking. This is just a discussion. This is not a formal class. This is really a place to ask questions and mastermind about investing. There's two topics that we can talk about, 1031 exchanges and seller financing. Does anyone have a preference of which of those two topics we start with?
I need both today, thanks.
Oh, okay, great. Anybody else?
I definitely want seller financing as well. I just got an offer also on spruce for that.
Oh, great, okay. Spencer?
I'll give you just a couple of the details on mine. On the 1031 exchange, the person needed some of the proceeds, but not all. And so I was made aware that you can put some in a facilitator's trust and have some, you know, for your own use. And then deadlines. I'd like to know how many days before you have to identify property, close on property. I've heard up to 2 years, but I've heard as short as 60 days.
Well, let me tell you what I think, and of course anybody here can also contribute. So it's called the boot is how they describe any of the proceeds that you're going to take out and pay your pay taxes on. I mean, the whole purpose of a 1031 is to avoid taxes, at least not avoid, but maybe postpone. So you can take part or all of that, and it just it's a tax thing at that point, really. So like whatever is going to be 1031 goes into the facilitator account, usually just stays with the title company, and whatever they're going to take has to be on the settlement statement, and then that gets wired to them and they have to make sure they claim taxes for that. So it's really something on the settlement statement that the title company should be taking care of.
Right, and then I've also found out that there are some that can go retro.
It's called a reverse 1031. I don't know much about those, to be honest. Does anybody else have experience with reverse 1031s?
And so I guess should I be encouraging my clients, number one, obviously, to talk to the facilitator before this goes down. But I have also heard that the property gets sold to the facilitator, and then the facilitator is the actual grantor on the warranty deed. So
No, I've never heard that.
So that's what broker Dave told me yesterday, that sometimes
it's possible.
Transfers from the seller actually sells to the intermediary, and then the intermediary sells off. It just sounds like there's a lot of intricacies that can go down. Who is the person, like if you've got a 1031, who should you be bringing on your team to make sure it goes flawlessly?
My opinion, and again, everybody throwing your 2 cents here, but my opinion is it's the title company and then accountant CPA. Those are the 2 people, because this is a paperwork issue in terms of like where the money goes. I've never worked with someone that used a facilitator. I don't know if that's different than just escrow. Typically, how I've seen it happen is the company or the property sells, that money never leaves the title company. It's just sitting in escrow, never gets dispersed. And the now buyer has 45 days to identify properties and 6 months to close. And that can be one property, that can be multiple properties. It's just they have to close within 6 months.
And
Anybody else have?
Sorry, I'm dominating here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. So I know that it needs to be a like property. So does that mean if it's an investment property, they can't turn it over into an owner occupied? That seems silly. Or if it's owner occupied, they can't turn the proceeds over into an investment property?
That's correct. So if it's owner occupied, then they get up to $250,000 tax free anyway, up to $500,000 if they're a married couple. If it's an investment property, what does that mean? They haven't lived in it long enough.
You have to live in it to avoid capital gains taxes. So if they've only lived in it like 1 of 5 years, then it's still considered an investment property. Yes, by definition?
I don't think it's considered an investment property. I just think you have to pay tax on it, on the proceeds. That's the difference. It has like a primary residence has nothing to do with 1031s. They're totally separate games. And if you're if you're selling an investment property, it is my understanding that you cannot use those proceeds to buy primary residence. You have to buy a commercial. I don't mean necessarily
like
over 5 units, but some kind of right. Like it has to be another investment property. You cannot put that money tax free into your primary. Now you can just take the proceeds and buy your primary. That's fine. But the 1031 is exclusive to investment properties. Yeah.
Okay.
Alan, I've never done a 1031. I'm looking at doing one personally on one of my investment properties.
Great.
So
Awesome.
Can you walk me through the process of I'm hearing intermediary, facilitator. Are those synonymous, or are those?
So today is the first day I've heard facilitator. So like in my experience, like 1031 exchanges happen with the title company. They have to know about it beforehand. They hold the funds. You tell them where to disperse the funds when you're going to be buying something else. It's 100% just handled within title. Now there may be services out there. I'm not saying
the title company is calling themselves a facilitator. So like the escrow
there you go.
Great.
Title company.
She said, it needs to be
intermediate.
Then yes, if that's the case, then yes,
synonymous.
it'd be synonymous. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you're working with a title company that's familiar with doing 1031s. Not all of them are.
So if I'm selling one of my properties, it's an investment property. It's always been one. We've never owner occupied it. Do I need to state in any sort of addendum that we're doing a 1031 exchange on the property, or is there a 1031 exchange addendum that you should?
What I typically see is seller is participating in 1031 exchange as a require, like an addendum, just because for some reason it may slow down the transaction. Like I think that's why I see it more often than not. Typically, it doesn't really it doesn't make any difference to the buyer of the property. It doesn't affect them in any way other than it may affect timeline if there's for some reason some additional hoop that has to be jumped through for a 1031. But most of the time, like it's something that's disclosed within the agent remarks. And then typically they'll just add it onto an addendum so that there's disclosure that it's happening. It doesn't affect the buyer though. Okay.
So you're letting title know, say, hey, I'm doing a 1031 exchange. They will act as the intermediary. You have 45 days. Designate X amount of properties and you have to close within 6 months. When we're talking about quote unquote like properties, I've got a single family home. It just has to be an investment property, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily another single family home.
Correct. Yeah.
How does
and if I might jump in, the use for the 1031 exchange addendum, and there's 2 of them. There's one on the MLS for being a buyer and there's one for being a seller. They're on the MLS, so you don't have to like fill it out yourself. You can totally fill in the blanks. The reason why you use it as a seller, like Alan said, it doesn't necessarily affect the buyer, but what it does is it adds additional proof for you as the seller that you went into this transaction anticipating that it would be a 1031. So it's kind of like double covering you in the case that the IRS were to take a closer look at these funds and say, hey, was it really a 1031 exchange? Yes, absolutely. It was exchanged during the course of the transaction.
It was stated in the rep sheet. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Good, because I'm really good at making up stuff. I just write stuff in addendums and.
Well, let me share my screen, and I pulled up the addendum on the MLS just so we could all share and look at that. So you can guys see my screen.
So you're saying, Linda, there is one from the buy side as well as the sell side.
It's this one. It's from the buy or the sell side.
Gotcha.
You just choose.
Gotcha. And then when we're talking like properties, just has to be another investment properties. Do you know, and maybe this is probably a better question for my accountant, whether he knows or not is another question, but what about syndicated deals, REITs, or potentially
Like fractionalized ownership?
Yeah, fractionalized ownership.
So there is a way to do it. It's my understanding in talking with like 1031 exchange companies and financial advisors and those types of people, that it's a little bit of a more complicated process, but the general rule of thumb in a 1031 exchange is that it has to be like for like property, and you have to have the same or more amount of money invested. So you have to take your proceeds and either invest that same amount of money or more in order to qualify for it to be a 1031.
I don't know if that necessarily answers my
Linda, when you say like properties, I believe that it's a pretty broad definition, but can you maybe specify a little bit more about what that means to you? Like property?
So rental property for rental property, land for land, commercial for commercial. You can be flexible within those. Like you could totally exchange out one single family investment property for two duplexes, right? Like it's still investment property for investment property, residential investment. But you couldn't do, at least this is my understanding, you couldn't do like an investment exchange and then invest into raw ground. That would not be like for like.
So here's my scenario. This group that I'm working with, we have a hotel under contract, and I want to sell a property, do a 1031 exchange, and we're doing multifamily conversions on these hotel properties. Like for like, not like for like.
You know who I would call, Spencer? Call Real Advantage Title. They have a 1031 exchange department. They'll be able to tell you exactly.
Oh, okay. I will.
But I mean, you might be able to stretch that. Is the hotel conversion going to be converted into long-term held rentals?
It is.
Maybe. Yeah, I would ask.
It's currently a hotel, but the whole. Yeah, we're doing multifamily conversion, studio, kitchenette.
Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would ask for sure. I would definitely ask.
Is that in their Salt Lake office, or do they put you in touch with somebody?
I think they have like a whole department through Orange Coast. So the parent company, but they do have like a specific department that handles 1031 exchanges.
Okay, I'll reach out to Shanice or John. Good to know. And then, have you ever done one with Real Advantage yet?
I'm actually just now looking into doing my first 1031 exchange personally.
Yeah,
I've handled a lot of 1031 exchanges. Yeah, right. High five. I've handled a lot of 1031 exchanges for clients, but they've all been fairly simple and straightforward. So I don't know the answer to your question. But I've done all sorts of other kinds of 1031 exchanges. Like we've even done, I don't know if anybody even knows that this is an option, but there's something called a reverse 1031 exchange. So you could actually sell the property first and hang on to your proceeds and and then buy something that's a traditional 1031 exchange, right? Or you could buy the property first and then sell your investment property and retroactively apply those funds towards the new investment in a reverse 1031 exchange.
Okay.
So they're flexible. They're a really cool tool to use. Just make sure that you're talking to someone that knows what they're doing and can answer those specific types of questions.
Okay.
Great.
Well, I appreciate it. I'll definitely reach out to Shanice or John and get in touch with the right people to answer that question, because I'm hesitant to put this house on the market unless I can do a 1031 exchange.
Right.
So,
Anyone else have questions about 1031s? And Linda, thank you so much for that definition of reverse 1031. It actually got brought up and I haven't participated in one of those before, so I wasn't exactly sure how it worked.
Yeah, I actually didn't even know they were a thing until we had some clients, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now. They actually bought their new investment property before we sold their other one. And we were like, wait, that's backwards. You can't do that. And we got in touch with a 1031 exchange company and they're like, no, you can. It's just a different product of 1031 exchange. And it's very specific, just like a traditional 1031 exchange, but it is possible to handle those proceeds tax-free in a different order.
But then how, let's see. My understanding is that they can't take the funds. So if you receive proceeds, then how does that work? Do you just have to show in the settlement statement and show where it's been held and provide the funds back? Because I thought that it was kind of dead in the water if they collected.
If they collect the funds themselves, it's much more difficult to prove that it's a 1031 exchange. That's why you should utilize a 1031 exchange company.
So, but when you're talking about the reverse, you're just saying it can happen backwards, but just have it planned before.
Correct.
Okay.
Sabrina, did you have a question?
The key is don't spend that money. If you
Right.
spend it, they tax it.
Any other questions around 1031 before we move on to seller financing? Great. So Sabrina, you just mentioned,
I was on mute. Alan, have you done one?
Seller finance?
No, a 1031 exchange.
No, the only property that I've sold that I bought as a rental so far was in my 401k. And so the proceeds were all tax-free and went right back into that account. So I didn't have to do a 1031.
Got it. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm just, Spencer, will you keep me posted on yours and I'll do the same with mine? Because I like, we talk about 1031 exchanges all the time and we do them for clients all the time, but gosh, I don't think a single one of us has done them for ourselves.
Yeah.
Probably true. Yep.
Sending an email right now to Shanice and I'll let you know what I hear.
Okay.
So,
sorry.
No problem. So Sabrina, you just mentioned that you got a seller finance offer. Do you want to maybe just explain what you got and then let's talk a little bit more about that?
I haven't actually got it. I got a request to see if we would take it. And I told the guy
Oh, I
last
see.
night to write it up. Sorry, I didn't mean to mislead you. I told him last night to write it up and then I would present it. He wanted to know the terms and everything like that before he would say he would do it or not, but he would be open to it.
Mhm.
So I don't
See, Spencer, you just had to ask.
Yeah.
So I actually just bought a rental.
Assume the loan.
Yeah. He doesn't want to.
I just purchased a rental off the MLS with seller financing. It was actually advertised as seller financing, which I've never, I mean, I've seen it, but like typically when they say that, like it's outlandish. So I thought what I'd do is explain that deal, but also show you the paperwork that that we worked on to actually get that taken care of. So this is a house in Kearns that was listed at $230,000. It's a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and the inside is like gutted. So there's no kitchen right now, just the pipes. There's half a bathroom. The rest of the house is actually in pretty good shape. Just needs some paint and some carpet. But my guess is that's why they wanted to do seller financing, because you couldn't like a traditional mortgage would not cover it because it doesn't have functional kitchen or fully functional bathroom. So so I called the guy up, and what are some questions that you folks think I would ask when it comes to seller financing? Like how do you broach that subject? I mean, I can tell you what I did, but I think like it's important to know the questions and how to ask them, because most agents are afraid of the words seller financing, but savvy agents can do a lot of business. This guy said he does like 3 or 4 of these a year for his people. So what do you guys think?
I mean, I've done seller finance deals as an agent a few times, and yeah, you're right. Like as long as you're asking the right questions, they can be just as solid and just as likely to close as any other deal. It's just a matter of having the right things lined up in the right places to have them follow through. And like Rachel has processed a few of these for me, like people that can't get traditional financing because they're self-employed and need to have a couple of years of taxes, or in Alan, in your case, a home that's completely gutted and it won't go traditional financing. These are really cool tools to know and understand on a really in-depth level, because you can provide a service to your clients that most realtors don't even know how to handle.
Yeah, one of the things that I always ask is I try to get more information about the seller's situation, like to find out why are they seller financing it. Was this an investment property? Was this like their home at one point and they moved out? Like what's the situation? Do they have an underlying mortgage? Because that will also change things in terms of paperwork. So I called up the agent and explained to him what I was looking to do, because my situation was I wanted to fix it up and rent it and just hold it. There was no, I'm not flipping it. That was one of his first questions. Are you going to flip this? And I wasn't flipping it. And he said, okay, well, you sound like the perfect candidate because you understand seller finance. I've done seller financing a couple of times already, and you're not looking to sell it. So I dove in a little bit deeper with him. The purchase price was $230,000, and on the MLS it said the minimum they'll take is $30,000 down. So I just went to him and said, okay, I can give you $30,000. How do we structure the note that the seller wants on this thing? So some of the things that you want to talk about when you're talking about are, how long is the note for? Is there a prepayment penalty? When can I refi? Are the payments interest only, or are they principal and interest? What's the interest rate that needs to be on the loan? So what we came up with is, well, actually, I'll share my screen and I'll show you the addendum inside the contract. One second. Okay. Make this big. Oh, that's really big. Make this smaller. Okay. So the contract itself, pretty straightforward. I mean, it's just a standard REPSI, and they came back with an addendum that just kind of talks a little bit about, they wanted earnest money be non-refundable. One of the things that I always do is I just tell the agent that they can keep all the commission. So, in a seller finance situation, they may be getting 6%, they may not. They may give some of it back to the seller. So I just said, hey, I'm just looking to buy a house. You can keep all the commission. Of course, like agents respond to that, right? We all want to make more money on a transaction. So the first thing is, like, you'll notice that it says this counteroffer subject to the acceptance of escrow and commission instructions, because it says that I, as the buying agent, I'm getting nothing, and that the selling agent is getting everything. So then after we talked, we went through this addendum, and it's useful. I mean, as realtors, I feel like we must use this because it's the reps, it's part of the state documents. A lot of other investors have very specific like addendums and contracts and all of that stuff that are specific to it. But I feel like we really are under more scrutiny because we're agents and professionals in the industry. Like using the standard state forms, in my opinion, is the best thing to do. You'll notice first they talk about credit documents. So what this is talking about is, how is the mortgage that this lender / seller is going to give me, how is it going to be recorded at the county? That's really what this is about. And so is it a note in deed of trust, or is it a note in all exclusive deed of trust? Now, anybody else please jump in here. Typically, in my opinion or my experience, the note and deed of trust is used when there's no underlying mortgage, and the note and all-inclusive deed of trust is used when there is one. However, they can always do an all-inclusive deed of trust. Does anyone understand the difference between the two?
Yeah, so it does. It combines multiple loans into a single security instrument.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
all-inclusive.
So. Yeah, and my understanding too is that there's more. So for the note and all-inclusive deed of trust, typically what that means. So I did this. The house that I sold in Kearns, I'm like the king of Kearns this year. The house that I sold in Kearns that was in my 401k had an all-inclusive deed of trust because I took over someone's mortgage. I didn't assume it. I just took over payments for it. And the reason that it's an all-inclusive deed of trust is if I stop paying, then the seller who sold this to me, whose loan is in their name, has the right to foreclose on me before the bank can. So that's typically why that protection is there. It's to say, okay, well, if for some reason, because the seller is acting as the bank in these situations, right? Like they are saying, I'm lending you this money. Part of that money may be an underlying mortgage, so anyway, that's the difference between the two.
When would we use
I don't
the term
believe
wrap?
So wrap is an all-inclusive deed of trust.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, a lot of times a wrap also will be like in the case that I had in Kearns, the mortgage to the seller was exactly what the mortgage was to the bank, because I just bought it at that rate. She wasn't making any money in addition to what I put down. But sometimes there can be a wrap where you say, hey, I found someone that's going to sell me a house for $200,000. They have a $160,000 note in place with their mortgage company. I'm going to take that over and I'm going to sell this for $300,000. And so now the end buyer is going to pay a $3,000 mortgage payment. Part of that is going to the underlying mortgage and part of that is going to me. So that's a lot of times what they mean when they say a wrap or a sandwich. It basically means that like you're selling a seller finance deal and you're making a spread on that. That happens from time to time as well. It just depends on the person and what they're trying to do. So let's move down to credit terms. So this is really like what goes into the note, which is the mortgage, what goes into the note that you're going to sign on. So it's what's the actual principal amount of the note. So it's $200,000 because I'm putting $30,000 down as the down payment on this $230,000 house, right? So she's carrying a note, and that's a term that is pretty common, carrying or seller carryback. It means that the seller is bearing some or all of the remaining debt on the property. So she's doing a $200,000 note. I'm paying 6%. And this was interesting. So I'm paying $1,000 a month and it's interest only. So and the reason they wanted to do that is, so like within, I have to pay this off completely, meaning I have to refi it essentially, within 8 years, which is this 96. But later on, it'll say, oh yeah, right here. So I'll put down $30,000. $2,000 will be an interest-only payment of $1,000, and the note has a prepayment penalty if paid off prior to 36 payments being made, so 3 years. So why do you think that they want to do it that way? Any ideas? So I can see that the reason they're doing this is because they don't really care about paying down that $200,000 note. They want the interest, and that's why it's an interest-only payment. So at the end of 36 months, when I go to refi, which I will, the underlying note will still be $200,000. I will have not reduced any of that principal, but to me, that makes a lot of sense. One, because this isn't a traditional mortgage, so I'm not having to put it in my name, so it doesn't show up on my credit report. Also, within 3 years, I'm confident, especially once I refi or rehab the place, it's probably worth about—
This is not transferring title. You're not transferring title.
No, it is. Absolutely it is.
Okay.
Yeah, this is in my name. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So what you're talking about when title doesn't transfer, it's called contract for deed. Similar to a car payment where like the company holds your note until you pay the car off and then you get the title. This is not that. So this is, everything transferred into my name, just like a typical sale. We're using a company called Escrow Specialists, which is very common for people to use here in Utah. They're up in Ogden, I think. And so essentially what will happen is Escrow Specialist is in charge of getting payment from me and pulling it out of my bank. And then they will transfer either to just her if there's only one note, or if there's an underlying note, they're going to split that, similar to what I was talking about, and they'll pay the seller something, and if there's an underlying mortgage, they'll pay that as well. The important thing about using a company like Escrow Specialist is that I'm going to mess up the actual number of this tax form, but there is, I believe it's a 1098 that shows the interest that I've paid, so I can take that off of my taxes. And then there's also the seller gets, I think it's 1098 as well, but something slightly different, but they get a tax document saying they have to claim the interest as income for them. And so you want to make sure that that happens, one, because I'm going to be paying $12,000 a year in interest. I want to make sure I can deduct that from my taxes, and they have to claim it. Really, it's protecting both of us, because no seller is going to do that form and send it to you, right? Like nobody's ever going to do that. So using a third-party company really makes it much more legitimate in that they're taking care of all that paperwork. I'm just making a payment like I always do, and then they'll disperse it. So that's kind of what the terms of it was.
Are these then typical terms for you?
Not necessarily. So the two seller finance deals that I have personally as rentals, one of them I sold, that was the Kearns property, but that was, I paid 30,000 down, and no, 40,000 down, and then I took over the mortgage, and that was it. The seller wasn't getting anything in addition to that. It was just I had the login directly to the seller's bank, or to the seller's mortgage company. I changed the checking account that it was pulling out of into mine, changed the email. That was it. With a situation like this, the interest only, this is the first one. I did the same thing in Ogden. It was another deal where I put down 23,000 and took over the mortgage, and the seller was, just got the 23,000. They didn't get anything in addition to that. So it really depends. What's that?
Is that like wholesaling? Like Randall Wall, I think, does those things.
So a wholesale is where you set up these terms and then you sell the contract. So like if I had set this up and then come to you, Sabrina, and said, hey, for a fee, I will let you step into my position in this contract and you can buy it. That's the difference between a wholesale and actually because I was just the end buyer. Like this is just me. And
you were
so
paying on their loan, right? You said directly.
What's that?
You were paying directly on their loan, their payment every month.
Yes, exactly.
But yet somehow and I could be mistaken, because
hey, that's why we're here.
First deals after I left Redfin was with Randall. I had found this seller, whatever. And we had done this, but Randall walked me through all the paperwork. Like I had no clue what I was doing. That was for sure. They did, thank God. And they had like all this verbiage in the addendum, but the client's name stayed on it, and then they were flipping it, and when they sold it later on. Is that the same idea?
And I mean, Randall Wall's a big wholesaler, and I've bought deals from Randall Wall before. So yeah, and when I mentioned earlier, there's some people that have very elaborate addendums. Like he was who I was thinking of, actually, because I've seen their addendum and I'm like, holy cow, it's like 15 different things they like talk about in there. So yeah, I mean, that's typically what would happen. Now, it's good that you bring up paperwork, because unlike just a standard sale, this lender, which is the seller, we have to have a note that is recorded against the property, right? Like there's just like any mortgage. And so you have to figure out like who is writing that note. Sometimes the sellers are savvy enough to do it. Sometimes like I would just use my title company, GT Title, that I use for all my investment stuff, because they do this all the time, where they'll write the note based on the terms that are put up here. In this case, when I went to title, the seller, who was also an investor, like had a note drafted already, and I just went through and made sure the terms were correct. But that's really important, because if the seller is not savvy, then you want to figure out a way to get that note created. Now, like, they always have the ability to go to anyone they want to get that note created. But a lot of times I found that like they they know what they're doing in terms of what the transaction is, but they don't understand all that paperwork. So they would rather just have, and I use just a title company because it's third party, right? I mean, I know that I work with them, but it's a standard note that then gets filed against the property, so that in this situation, when there's not an underlying note, right? I'm assuming that she owns this property. So in that case, then she becomes first position lien against the property, right? If there was an all-inclusive deed where there was an underlying mortgage and the seller was involved, then essentially the mortgage company is always going to be first position on the property. Like, there's no question, that always stays in place. So then in second position would be the seller, that essentially is wrapping that first position, right? Like, she's just like, that seller would be on the hook for whatever the underlying mortgage was, and they would be in second position. And so, like, that's also really important. I believe that she's in first position, meaning the seller of this property. But that's really important, like, that you understand, because a lot of times agents don't understand that you need that note. So they might like draft this addendum, but like, they don't understand that like there's additional paperwork that needs to be filed, because when we're doing a transaction where we're representing the seller, the mortgage company is giving all that paperwork, right? Like, we never care about the buyer's paperwork when it's a traditional mortgage, because the buyers just go to their title company, they've already got everything drafted from the bank, they sign. In a seller financing situation, you've got to do a little bit more, and it also starts to separate you from other agents in that you understand what needs to happen when they go to closing. Typically, seller finance deals are done at the same company, meaning same title company. So like, you'll notice that there was in the addendum, I think they say it in here, yeah, all parties will held a title and everything closed at this Metro title, because you don't want to split close on a seller financing deal, only because like, if you have one person in a title company that doesn't understand seller financing, the whole thing can get messed up. And so you typically say, great. I mean, as a buyer of a seller finance deal, like, I want to be as flexible and easy to work with as possible, both for the agent and the seller. And so that's why like, the agent got all the commission and I went and used his title company, because I just want to make it simple for them to work with me. Other questions?
Okay, so can I give you my specific and get your opinion?
Absolutely, yeah, please.
So
and Linda, I know you've done some too, so please feel free to jump in here.
And I just know that I'm far, like, my person, I'm more of a social worker than an investor, and I'm trying not to blend the two here, and it's getting a little bit iffy. I've got this 70-year-old couple trying to buy this $150,000 property. We're having issues with our VA financing, and I'm almost dead in the water on it. And I know that they've got a distant relationship with the seller, so I think that there is a possibility for seller financing, but I haven't approached it yet because I want to come in with the best solution instead of, because I don't think they have any experience with it, so I want to be able to give them the best solution. These people have zero down, and I know what they can afford a month, and I do know that it's more than her mortgage would be. So I'm wondering, me as an investor stepping in, helping them to purchase the property through seller financing, and then working a deal with my clients, because I know they will qualify come next year. So how
are you suggesting that you will buy the property and seller finance it?
Yes.
Okay. So what's the question?
So the question is, how do I package this that it is an incentive to her to work with them? I know she wants to sell to my buyer, but my buyer can't get it financed. I know they have zero money down, and so that does not bode well. But if I step in and help, I know I can protect myself through, putting an investment in, and then what would I expect out? How would you package this?
So, I mean, there's a couple of ways that you could look at this, right? Like my first thing, and I've got all sorts of red flags going off in my head, is like,
exactly.
I know.
Do you really want to risk your own financial security to help your clients?
So the property is, it's appraised for 160. It's in terrible shape, but they're buying it for 150. So I already know that there is equity in the property. I know that they're going to be dead within 5 to 10 years. If I get a deed at the end, this could actually benefit me?
I mean, I would very clearly look at the line between, are you helping your clients or are you profiting from your clients? Like
That's what I said, social worker investment.
So, I mean, if you're looking at it as an investment for yourself to sell to your clients eventually, I'd still kind of be a little bit wary of like your fiduciary responsibility to your clients.
Yes.
There's a cut and dry, like, here's your solution answer. And that would be if you're looking at buying it and then renting it to your clients, you might consider buying it and then lease optioning it to your clients. But I would be very careful not to mingle that all together.
Yeah. So, and the thing is I could, like, I did post that on Facebook, and other people said, send them to me, you know, I can help you. So if I give somebody else the financial,
I'll take your client.
Right? See? So I'm like, why can't I do that? But then their fiduciary duty comes into play. But truly, at the end of the day, I really just want them not to be homeless.
Well, Melanie, let me ask you something. Have you chatted with, now is the seller represented with an agent?
Yes.
So have you chatted at all about whether or not, like, they have a mortgage, whether they would be open to seller financing, you know, as the lender on that?
They do have a mortgage.
Okay.
And I have, like I said, I wanted to make sure that I knew how to package this before I approached her, but that phone call needs to happen today.
Why don't you look at a lease option on this? Like, you know, your clients are going to qualify next year. Why don't you see if the sellers would be willing to carry the mortgage with your clients paying more than market rent, like they can afford until they can close next year? That's an incentive for your clients to not be homeless and an incentive for the seller to continue in contract with your buyers. And then you're not risking your own financial well-being or getting in the way of your fiduciary responsibility.
That would probably be my first choice. They do have to provide 2 letters for that to happen. One, Social Security Administration coming to the one party. They cannot understand that money coming into their household doesn't qualify because it's coming to one individual versus the other. The one can't be on the loan because his credit's too low, and the other one, the payment's not coming to, and they cannot separate that. They're like, it's all the same money. It's all coming into the same account. Like, they're just really, I mean, they're elderly, right? It's hard to explain, but so I'm trying to package it, and I think that's probably the best option. But I'm saying, is I have to be able to assure the seller that this lease option would be able to be exercised.
Pull your lender in. Your lender is going to be able to help you there. Here we're working with the clients. We have this, and this in place. Here's the time requirement. Here's how we're going to get it done. I mean, just having a good lender, like I've done this a bunch of times where the clients, for whatever reason, are 6 to 12 months out and qualifying, and having the lender get in touch with the seller's agent and make some assurances as to, here's how often we're talking to the clients. Here's what we need in order to qualify. Here's how we're going to get it done.
Yeah, there's question marks. And so that's the problem. There's question marks that I have to be forthright with the seller's agent, and I can't paint a rosier picture than exists. And so
so I mean, at the end of the day, if they don't qualify and if there's no road to them for sure qualifying, then that might be the case, that this is not the best solution for anybody in this case. And for you to jump in as well puts yourself at risk.
Yeah. So then that's what I'm looking at, plan B. So plan A, yes, I agree, the lease option's the best. But like I said, I can't give assurances that I don't know exactly exist. And then on plan B would be the seller financing. And with 0% down, do people ever even accept that?
Well, every seller is different. You said that there's a distant relationship or relation between these two people. So like, it's possible if the sellers are willing to help them out, right? And that entirely depends on the seller's position, what's their mortgage, what's their financial situation. I mean, there's a lot of questions there, but it can happen. I mean, there's no reason, like in this situation, I didn't have to put, I mean, optimally, I didn't have to put down $30,000, right? I could have just said they're going to carry a note for $230,000, but I don't know this person, right? And so of course they're not going to do that to me. They want some kind of down payment, but that's the thing with seller financing. It is absolutely customizable to any situation because it's just about two parties agreeing.
Is somebody like you, Alan?
What's that?
And I said plan C is somebody like you, who takes on a property like with a deed when they die.
Now, yeah, that what's that called? It's
Life estate.
life estate. Yes, so thank you. Yeah, yeah. So, but I mean, I have to echo what Linda's saying. I think that she's spot on in terms of this is not about you making assurances. This is about the lender making assurances, right?
Yes,
Like
I am
you're
speaking
saying
to
I
the
can't
lender.
pay. What's
Yeah.
that? But I
speaking
just
to the
mean
lender.
like in terms of like keeping roles separate,
Yeah.
like as an agent, legitimately, you can't guarantee anything about their financial situation.
Right.
You haven't seen all their documents, right?
True.
So like working with the lender, but if the lender isn't comfortable giving assurances, then, you know, to Linda's point, it might be a dead deal because of that, right? So it really just depends on the agent, and it depends on what's going on with these sellers. You know, to them, is this their retirement? They need the payout, or is this something that they can just like get a monthly payment and be happy with? I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that it comes down to.
Thank you.
I think.
Okay, I think we've explored it enough that I feel comfortable having a conversation with the seller's agent now and getting a step
Great.
further. Thank you.
Yeah, great, absolutely. So I was going to go through the rest of this, or if there's other questions. I mean, this is a mastermind free flowing. So, other questions around seller financing?
No, I'd love to see the rest of this.
Okay, sure. So, so we kind of went through the terms that are all up here, taxes and assessments. So this is a really important thing. Who is paying taxes? And so this is more important when there is not an underlying mortgage, because if there is an underlying mortgage, then that underlying mortgage is collecting insurance and taxes, right? And they'll pay the taxes every year. You don't have to worry about it. If they aren't, if this like it's so because we're using escrow specialists and they're being the bank, right? So they are collecting every month. So my payment's actually going to be a little bit higher than 1,000. It'll be 1,000 for the mortgage payment, and then whatever my taxes and insurance are is what I'll be paying escrow specialists. And then escrow specialists will be able to take care of making that payment. But it's also something that you want to make sure on the closing statement you're getting the credit for the taxes for the year, just like any other transaction, right? Because like, for example, I mean, you know, we're going to be in October before we know it, and then taxes are due in November, right? So if I buy something in the middle of October, I want to make sure that I've been credited for all those taxes and that it's outlined in here, so that I can then get those paid without having to come out of pocket with $1,500 or $1,800. So that's another really important thing. What's that?
Who's your accountant?
So I just switched accountants to a guy named Ken Klinger, but I've only been with him for a month, so I can't necessarily recommend him.
Okay.
But he does a lot of realtors and he does a lot of real estate investors, and that's why I moved over to him. Okay, late payment, you know, this is just fill in the blank here. It's just, you know, now it's interesting that it's 10 days. So, you know, when escrow specialists, at closing, I filled out a paper and said, here's my bank account information, blah, blah, and then they're going to get in touch with me. The first thing they're going to ask is, what day of the month do you want this taken out of your account? Now, typically, I try to pay my mortgages on the 12th because I have property management, and property management disperses on the 10th. So I don't want to front the mortgage. That just causes like big cash flow issues, right? So I'd rather like get the money in my account and then get it paid. In this situation, then like basically I'll probably do the 9th, so that it's always taken care of beforehand. It talks about the late fee, due on sale. So let's talk about that with seller financing. That's an important one. So who can give us a definition of the due on sale clause?
If you sell it, you have to pay off the previous mortgage.
Done, right? There it is. So here's the deal. When they have an underlying mortgage and you are taking it over, you're not assuming it, it's never put in your name, but you're taking over the payments, there's always a possibility that the bank will be notified somehow, and then they will call it due because technically that seller sold the house, right? So really that's what this is talking about. It's like it's like you got to understand that that's a possibility when you're buying something. I've never had it happen. I only know one person on one house that had it happen. And that was because the seller for some reason got upset and contacted the bank and told them they sold it. So that was very malicious. It wasn't like a process thing. But that's something always to keep in mind, right? Because if they call it due, there's really not a lot you can do besides sell it. And it's a negotiation, right? Like you can hopefully negotiate with the bank and say, listen, like give me 30 or 45 days, I'll sell this, you'll get your money. But it's important that that's always something that has to do with seller financing. So buyer disclosures. So this is actually really interesting. So this section is saying I'm going to fill out this buyer financial information sheet that is in the MLS, that I'll also provide copies of my IRS returns for the last 2 years, and that the seller contact my employer for verification of employment. They didn't have me do any of this. I mean, they checked will and then never asked for it. But that's all with about like look at that financial information. At this point, you know, if you're self-employed, if like, you know, you've just got a tricky situation where you can't necessarily get approved, like this, filling out this form and submitting it with the offer is going to make it a stronger offer for the sellers to look at, right? Because they can see, like, instead of, hey, yeah, I'm good for it, like they can see this information. You can show them that, you can supply the tax docs at when you submit everything. So it just goes to like make you a stronger agent if you're submitting on behalf of someone else, or if you're doing it yourself. I didn't on this one because the agent, as I talked to him, like he knows that I've done seller financing. I'm totally willing to give that information. They just never asked for it. So that's that. Seller approval. Oh yeah, this just means that they can get a credit report from you. They can use the credit report and the information in section 7 of buyer disclosures, and then and decide. So they can say, hey, I'm going to conditionally accept this, but I have to see your credit. And then they may get your credit, and you have like a 500 credit score, and you can't prove your income, and they can just cancel at that point, right? Which is rare as a seller being able to cancel, but that's one of the ways that they can do it. Let's see, some of this I haven't actually read, I'm not gonna lie here. Sole discretion. Oh yeah, this just says that the seller can cancel based on that information. Did you have something, Spencer?
I was just laughing at you that you hadn't read it. I'm
like, yeah, I sign things. What? Like, it's,
put it in front of me, I'll sign it.
You know, it's easier. Like I get the house, right? Okay, I'll sign it. Here is another really important one. Is this title insurance, because it's expensive. So, you know, typically when you're a buyer, you're paying for a lender's policy. In a situation where it's seller finance and possibly like they already own it, like you're not buying a title policy for the seller because the lender, because the lender's the seller and the lender is giving you or seller is giving you a clear title. So this is up to the seller, but like as a buyer, I don't want to pay another $1,300 or whatever for a title insurance policy for the lender. So that can save you some money right there. And then I am, you know, I'm required to give them my social security number or my my EIN for my company. And then this one's right here. So questions on that before I go over to the brokerage instructions? Nope. So then coupled with this, you'll remember like in that first addendum with that, it said like acceptance of the escrow instructions is part of the acceptance of this contract. And that's really like, this is where they're saying they get everything, I get nothing, which is exactly what I'm happy to do. So it just kind of goes through like, hey, this is the sales price. Had an agreement with her. This is how much he's getting, and I'm getting nothing as the seller's brokerage, or the selling brokerage, which is the buyer's brokerage. So another really important thing. Now, this is also what I do. I bought a flip this year from another agent and did the same thing. Keep everything. I just want like the house. And so we filled out one of these. I was still the buyer's agent, right? And representing myself and disclosed and all that stuff. But I took nothing from the transaction itself because I want the seller. Because part of my goal here too is that I want agents to know that I'm the guy that will let them double sign a contract if there's a distressed home they have. And so that's always like, I want them to get paid. I mean, obviously they're not going to get paid when I sell it because I'll sell it. But I want them to get paid as much much money as they can on every transaction. So that's worked out pretty well for me. I did have an agent. I bought a flip in Kearns earlier this year. So I've done 6 houses in Kearns this year, which is, I'm the king of Kearns for some reason. So I just bought 2 rentals, this one and another one in Kearns. But I had him call me up and just said, hey, this like house is pretty distressed. It was actually on the MLS. It wasn't his listing, but I just want those relationships to keep going. Because I think as agents, this is how we build our wealth, right? We become known as people that will buy and let the other agent double side it. They'll send us more stuff in that case. So questions on any of that? Well, I hope this was helpful. Does anybody else chat about our live? No? Linda, thanks again. Linda's on the committee with me, and I really appreciate your insight on some of that stuff, Linda. So thanks for contributing.
Yes, thank you, Linda. Wealth of knowledge, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, have a good day, everyone. See you later.
Yeah, Alan.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye.